the spiritual battle is coming to the West. And the enemies are wokeism or Marxism combining with Islamism.
That is a perfect example of how you can completely agree and simultaneously disagree with someone in a single sentence. Yes, I would agree with Charlie Kirk that there is a battle between the quote-unquote West and Islamists and Marxists who seem to be hell-bent on tearing down civilization, and especially the ingredients that make civilization, in the West at least, worth living for. Freedom, democracy, and capitalism. Basically the very things that many people fleeing Islamic and communist dictatorships are gravitating towards. They're immigrating towards the United States. And it's amazing. They're trying to pretty much tear it down. The United States and Western Europe. But where I would thoroughly disagree is that this is a spiritual battle that is playing out between demonic forces, underlying Islamists and Marxists. And there's angelic powers in the form of Christianity trying to battle this out for all of, for the eternal salvation of billions of souls. And it's not simply that I disagree with that. It is demonstrably false. It's factually incorrect, and it's dangerously misleading to think this way. And for people who say that I'm taking a spiritual battle for the soul of America out of context, out of respect for him who's no longer alive to debate this, there's actually millions of people who do believe this. And I've met quite a few. And it never ends well when people base major life decisions on false information like religious magical thinking. And for further proof that this is how all too many people really think, all you have to do is listen to the words of someone like Kayleigh McEnany, Trump's former press secretary, who had this to say in honor of Charlie Kirk's death.
Charlie pointed up. He had this authentic, real love for Jesus Christ, and his conservative philosophy was an outgrowth of that. But he would go to these campuses. I would speak at his women's event, and he would speak to lonely people who were lost on social media, felt empty, felt depressed on college campuses, and he would give them hope in Jesus Christ. And the last thing I would say, Sean, is I know that I know that I know that I know this. Charlie Kirk did not die today. Yes, he left his body. But I guarantee you, when he took his last breath, the first words that he heard were Jesus Christ saying, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." I'm thinking of Erica. She's a beautiful, beautiful mom, a beautiful woman, beautiful writer. I'm thinking of his kids. But I know where Charlie Kirk is today, and he is very, very much alive.
I've always been a fan of Kayleigh McEnany. She was a real joy to watch when she was Trump's press secretary during his first term. It was amazing to watch how she would so deftly, answer questions, and not only so quick, but so accurately and informatively. But that way of thinking is a clear blind spot. While I can understand that most people do not want to let go of loved ones, and therefore we make up these narratives that they live on forever in heaven with Jesus, and one day we're going to be reunited with them, we do ourselves no favors in denying the reality that we need to make the most of this life in the here and now. And that concept of being a servant for Jesus is just as troubling as listening to this from activist Muslims, all too willing to bring on more than just a spiritual battle, which Charlie Kirk was trying to warn us about.
Done hiding. We're done. We're done being tortured and hurt and judged. This is the correct religion. This is the religion that all of humanity needs to be a part of, Islam. And we will not stop until it enters every home. So I want you to repeat after me. I want to hear it in every single district. It should tremble. Brooklyn should hear it. The Bronx should hear it. Queens should hear it. Say it as if the Ummah depends on this, my brothers and sisters. La ilaha illallah. Muhammadur Rasulullah. There is no God worthy of worship except Allah, the God of Jesus, the God of Moses, the God of Abraham, and the God of the last and final prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam.
Look, it's unfortunate that we as human beings are in a seemingly constant battle over what is true and what is false and what are good and what are bad ideas. that make civilization and just life in general worth living for and meaningful. Which is why instead of framing this as a spiritual battle, it's much more likely that we're just evolving as societies. Look, there is an evolution to the ideas and cultures that either make life worth living or create virtual hellscapes on Earth, even on paradisical islands like Cuba, where my family fled from a communist dictatorship which took over that nation like a cancer. Unfortunately, avoidable tragedies like the assassination of Charlie Kirk and all the needless tribal divisions in our societies, they're going to continue until more people stop looking at reality through the prism of false religious narratives, most of which contradict each other because they can't all be true at the same time. This is why we need to start accepting and understanding how reality actually works, beginning with the fact that evolution is a very real process, even if it's not immediately visible to the naked eye, since it happens over millions of years in the development and even extinction of certain species. But evolution as an observable process over time doesn't just apply to the speciation of organisms. Evolution as a process can also be seen and documented in our technologies, especially when it comes to communication. For example, the iPhones and Androids almost all Americans have in their pockets are thanks to the trials and errors of over a couple thousands of years of experimenting with Egyptian papyrus scrolls, to the printing press, to the telegraph and the radio, to the camera and the phone, to televisions and computers. The end result for now is that we have these marvels of engineering and technology offering us entire libraries of information at our fingertips. And that same evolutionary process applies to the ideas and cultures we live and die under. It's why ancient religions become mythologies, and no one in their right mind nowadays is agnostic about whether Zeus from Greek mythology or Horus from Egyptian mythology is the correct god to worship. It's also why no culture is performing human sacrifices on altars anymore to the Aztec sun god Huitzilopochtli to ensure the sun rises in the morning. It's amazing the things humanity has figured out, such as plumbing, air conditioning, engineering that has allowed us to build skyscrapers, or taking the concept of the wheel all the way to the moon. But we still can't agree on the optimal ways to organize ourselves when it comes to governments and economic systems. For example, the debate between capitalism and communism should be over by now because communism never works, even if you disguise it as democratic socialism. It's why tens of millions of Russians, Chinese, and Cambodians, just to name a few, have died from famines under central planning and collectivization projects such as Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward, into the mass graves of millions of Chinese. Historically speaking, we know for a fact that no government, and much less an elitist group of bureaucrats, can centrally plan an economy for millions of people because no one can predict the future of unintended consequences. But at least when it comes to government systems, we've managed to evolve past being ruled by monarchies, let alone divine ones. But we still can't seem to evolve past dictatorships and theocracies, especially ones that kill their own people when they protest for their rights, like the freedom for women to not wear a hijab in Iran, or the ability for women to drive a car in Saudi Arabia. Which is why political activists like Charlie Kirk risked their lives to speak out against the undeniable human rights abuses imposed by Islamic autocracies, and even Islam itself as a belief system that punishes apostasy with death. However, as a brilliant communicator and organizer that Charlie Kirk undoubtedly was, he had a blind spot for the false narratives that make up Christianity. Namely, that Jesus Christ is everyone's Lord and Savior, and you'll burn in hell forever if you don't accept him as such. And of course, that's not what Islam claims, and much less Judaism, the original monotheistic belief system, which Christianity and Islam are second and third-rate carbon copies of. And it's competing religious belief systems like these that make contradictory claims, which can't all be true at the same time, that keep us from cooperating together to solve so many of our problems, namely the ones we can avoid in the first place. Hopefully in due time, we as a species will evolve past these religious narratives that push false choices onto societies in the form of political parties and all-encompassing ideologies. There's a time and place to be liberal, and there's a time and place to be conservative, And it's difficult to find that balance when groupthink takes over and pressures people to conform to their in-group or risk being shunned and isolated. And let's not wait for artificial intelligence to figure these things out for us either. Because I get the feeling that even though AI is just another evolutionary step, it doesn't seem to be one that's as interested in finding the truth as much as it is a technology trying to get massive returns on investments for techno overlords who give capitalism a bad name because they're all too willing to put most of humanity on a universal basic income diet as they make millions of jobs extinct. This is why more people need to evolve past believing that we're all part of some spiritual battle where Jesus is the ultimate master and people like Charlie Kirk are his faithful servant who died in service of some greater plan that somehow involves leaving behind a widow and 2 beautiful children who will never be raised by their biological father, who would have loved them more than any demonstrably fabricated imaginary God ever could. If I got anything wrong in this video, please let me know in the comments below. But if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for upcoming videos, and check out the links below for my original art and merchandise. And thanks for watching.